Welcome to the Shurman Report. Here's Peter Shurman.
Well, halfway through the week already, and here we are. Can't say it hasn't been eventful, can you? This will be an abbreviated show as we prepare for the Rosh Hashana holiday, the Jewish New Year, which, with all things Jewish, begins at sundown. So we'll be welcoming Stephen LeDrew at midweek this week instead of Friday, which is when he usually appears. And I'll have an interesting message for you after that. Welcome to the Shurman Report.
You're with the Shurman Report. Daily news commentary live at 5 p.m. Video version live at X, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's Peter Shurman.
Well, here is Peter Shurman along with Stephen LeDrew. And Stephen LeDrew, of course, broadcaster, lawyer. Can I call you disenfranchised liberal? And man about town. Welcome, Stephen.
Good afternoon, Peter. I'm not disenfranchised liberal, but I just make the point when people say, well, you're not liberal. I'm a liberal. Trudeau is a socialist progressive. He has used the liberal word mark to get elected, convincing people he's a liberal, and he's not. He's a socialist. So anyway, that's
like run on the right, govern from the left. Only if you're Trudeau, govern from the left. But we won't go there today. Well, at least we won't go there yet. I think there's a couple of pressing things sitting in the news. One of them is, what will the big response be from Israel to Iran? Because Iran last evening attacked Israel, firing, I believe it was 181, almost 200 missiles, we can say. Iran launched what was said to be the largest ballistic missile attack in history at Israel, and that'll go down, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said, a day in infamy. It was October 1st. Israel, surprisingly, reported minimal damage and casualties after managing to shoot down most of those missiles, which in and of itself is miraculous.
Yes.
This is a nation of 10 million people. They all pretty well went to bomb shelters and safe rooms for about an hour. There hasn't been a death reported. How do you explain that?
I think it's a combination of incredible technological superiority and good luck and God's on your side, I guess. It's just unbelievable that there were no casualties. It's unbelievable that Israel has the technology to shoot those out of the sky and do it so accurately. And maybe it's unbelievable that Iran is just so incompetent that they couldn't do better with those almost 200 missiles. But it is something that's not being covered too well in North American press. But it is an amazing act of aggression by Iran, and it is an amazing, stunning result by Israel. And what also was stunning to me was that a half or an hour after the missile started, the Israeli authorities said, "Okay, you can come out now. It's over." I don't know how they knew it was over, whether they knew that Iran only had 200 missiles, but it was just it's an amazing occurrence.
It's a feat of modern science for sure. Yeah. The question, and I'll provide a hint right now. Later in the program, after you and I are finished, I'm going to read something that came from Israel, because there are people out there who believe, and maybe they're right, that this is more than just technology, because the technology, there are 3 different systems: Iron Dome and Arrow and David Sling. These things all deal with different kinds of missiles fired from different distances, and somehow or other these technological geniuses, which they are in Israel, have managed to figure this thing out. And God only knows, let me say that, with whose help. Just a couple of side issues.
But also the United States was there. They had
the ships.
And I understand that the warships were also shooting down these incoming missiles. So I think that's good for people to know that the United States was there, part of it. I mean, everybody's concerned, and rightfully so, Peter, about this thing, becoming a more than in any other time we would say this is a war. I mean, this is a war. These are not just skirmishes, but becoming a a greater war. The only thing I believe that will prevent that is that the rest of the Arab world is not really, if I understand correctly, they aren't really behind Iran. They would like Iran to somehow, go away. And there is some goodwill, I think, amongst the Arab world, because they aren't joining in. They have before, but they aren't joining in to try to destroy Israel.
They won't join in. They won't join Iran because they're as big an enemy to Iran or of Iran as Israel is, and arguably bigger, because both the 20-odd countries exclusive of Iran in the area that aren't Israel are Arab or Muslim countries, as is Iran, but they don't buy what the mullahs in Iran are selling. And right. Iran is going to pay a price. I don't know what it is. I don't know when it is, but Iran is going to find itself at the mercy of somebody who wants to exact from Iran what it's trying to dish out, not just in the missiles that it fired last night, but in all of the billions of dollars that it's taken to put concrete tunnels underground and train literally hundreds, if not thousands, of guerrilla warriors, and that's all I'll deem Hamas, for example, to be, and Hezbollah. And you get to pay the piper in this thing, and I think it won't be too far away. And your description of the whole thing as war will carry an awful lot of weight when that happens.
Yeah, I think that people are very hopeful that that something is going to occur with Iran. As far as Lebanon is concerned, I have no idea where that's going to be going. But the good thing is, if Hezbollah is defanged, if it's if the leaders are murdered, killed, then it's better for everybody. And also Iran, I understand, and you talked about the guerrillas and the military. Iran has to have a strong military just to deal with the people, its own people, who are upset with the government. Who don't.
The RGC is said to be a strong military, but I don't know how it would behave on the ground. The last time we saw the Revolutionary Guard used on the ground was Operation Desert Storm 25 years ago, and that's when they left their equipment and ran. I don't know what's happening today. I've got to assume they're better than that, but I would hope that nobody ever has to engage, because hand-to-hand combat or machine against machine fighting in the desert is not anything that I expect out of the engagements that we've seen. I do want to make mention of one thing. We have this, horrible woman who's in charge of foreign affairs for Canada, Melanie Joly. I said a few things about...
She's a moron.
You called her a moron? I'm not going to disagree with you.
No.
And there she is last night saying, well, we stand behind Israel's right to defend itself, but we really must insist that everybody sit down for a ceasefire. What right, lady, have you got to sit down and insist that anybody do anything? You don't provide anything to anybody. You've taken away the defense contracts from Israel. Now you're complimenting them on showing restraint. What are you going to say when they fire back? And I don't need any answers to those questions. I just haven't got any respect for her.
Well, that's because she still thinks that Canada is what Canada used to be 50 years ago, when we had some armed forces, but we weren't afraid to engage. And particularly under this government since 2015, Canada has been diminished around the world, notwithstanding what the columnists of the Toronto Star say, that Canada is still out there proud. Baloney. And you're right. She's an embarrassment in the eyes of the world. And no one pays attention to Canada anymore, unfortunately.
Okay, so let's jump away from that, because I think that's a story where the book is halfway open and we haven't read the last chapters yet. Yeah. At this point, we probably should say a word or two about the debate that we watched last night. And I think that both of us were probably quite surprised, along with millions of other people.
Well, it's a very civil debate, and it showed that Vance is not half crazed, as I think Trump is. Trump has some very, very good points and some strengths, but he's also half crazed. I'm concerned about the American election, as so many other people are, simply because it's a matter of inches, Peter. I mean, it's so close.
It is.
And
there are no polls that even measure it within the confidence interval.
Yeah. And so if it keeps on like this, and the many hundreds of thousands, I'm told, have already voted, then we're going to have a disputed result. It won't be finished at election time, and I'm concerned about that. So the debate last night, back to your point, Peter, is that it was surprising that it was so civilized, and good for those two for making it that way. I don't think it swayed anybody, except for maybe people who wanted to vote Republican, concerned about Trump, and said, okay, this guy, this vice president candidate, has got his head screwed on, and he has some gravitas. So, but so does a Democrat. I think many people would like to see those two candidates, Peter, running for the top job as opposed to VP.
Interesting that you say that. I mean, there was a period a month or two ago, and I think I probably said it on this program at some point, where I was worried about who J.D. Vance was. I had seen Hillbilly Elegy, which is his life story. I wondered what had happened to make him go through a metamorphosis once he'd gone through Yale Law School and how he got to be elected senator. But the bottom line here is everybody tuned in expecting him to be kind of Trump 2, only younger and full of more testosterone and ready to go at it hammer and tongs. And instead what we saw is something, and in the words of a friend of mine who wrote to me, that may have moved the needle ever so slightly among those very people you're describing, the swing voters who hadn't decided yet, might have said of that debate last night, gee, I wanted to vote for Trump, but I was afraid about J.D. Vance and what he might be. Because after all, as they say, a heartbeat away from the presidency. He's not a crazy man. He had a very civil conversation with Walz. They agreed to shake hands after this was all over. I mean, I haven't seen that in an American debate. This was like watching a debate in the 70s, when debates were routine and people behaved as they should have behaved, and they actually followed the debate rules. They didn't turn off the microphones in that debate, except for one point, and I believe they were turned off because there was a challenge to the two women who were asking the questions. No other reason.
So I understand that. Yes, it was only turned off momentarily, and they just it's something I've monitored. I've had debates, and when I did it with mayoralty candidates in Toronto, I said to Wilma, and Rob Ford was there. And I said, we aren't going to have talk over. That's the worst thing, as you well know, Peter, from your radio experience and from being in the legislature. When two people are talking, it drives the audience crazy. And I said, if two people are talking, I'm going to cut off the mics. You got to do that.
That's all you can do.
Yeah.
Because all it is blah, 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 that's what you hear.
Yeah.
And so what's the point? So
it was
you
a very good debate, though. I think it augurs well for the future of the states, although I am worried about people accepting the result either way. Whoever wins.
Well, you know what, Stephen, I'll say this. People think, well, maybe they want to accept the results because Trump doesn't like to accept results that are not pleasing to him. I would remind you that there was a presidential race between George Bush and Tennessee guy. Why am I the environmental Al Gore
and the hanging chads?
The hanging chads, and we waited 2 weeks, and finally it was 100 of my relatives in Florida who had been away for Rosh Hashana and came back and voted. I'm kidding, but I mean, it really came down to a couple of people in central Florida that either voted one way or voted the other way, and that's how George Bush got to be president, at least the first time. So there have been debates before. There's also the famous, Dewey debate and the headline that lied way back when. So this won't be the first time.
And that was a New York Post, I think. But then there was men of honor, like Nixon, who knew that the 1960 election had been, there had been Daley was the mayor of Chicago, and somebody had been, tweaking around with the votes. As Kennedy's dad said, I don't mind paying for a victory. I'm not going to pay for an overwhelming victory. I'm not going to pay for a landslide. Nixon had evidence to challenge that, and he said, for the good of the nation, I am not going to. And, good for him. And Gore, when Bush won, Peter, Gore could have pursued it and could have caused a lot of trouble. He said, for the good of the nation, we're just going to let this go.
For the good of the nation, because that's our neighbor for 3,500 kilometers, and it's our biggest trading partner. And whether you like or you don't like what you see in the States on any level, doesn't make any difference. They're going to do what they're going to do, and they're not going to ask us for permission. The point is, when the stuff hits the fan and it sprays, we get splattered. Yeah. So with that, let me go to our last topic for today, and that is we've taken a look at some CRTC research that suggests fewer Canadians trust news media. The latest data shows StatsCan figures that illustrate journalists are considered less trustworthy than politicians or police. Oh, how nice. Fewer Canadians express trust in the news media. Is that because the news media have been, if not fully replaced, then obliterated by social?
Well, partly is that. Partly is because when people read or see, I mean, we had the debacle last week of that CTV actually creating a statement from Poilievre, and they cut and pasted it to make it sound like Poilievre said something that he didn't say, that he was voting against the dental plan, when in fact he wasn't. And he never intended that, and it was never a mistake on his part. It was CTV making an error. And the Toronto Star, when it has some news stories, which you learn later on, are absolutely false. Absolutely false. That's why the results of that CRTC survey say that the press is not highly regarded. And also when people say, and you know this, and we've had some examples before, I've had some people on my show talking about it, when the government is influencing the media that it pays, which is why your show, my show, other publications which do not accept money from the Prime Minister's office are being regarded more highly and more trustworthy than the Toronto Star and the CTV. I mean, the government pays a fortune to Bell Media. Bell Media takes that money, fires all its good journalists, and gives other money to its shareholders. I mean, it's a dog's breakfast out there with media.
There's something else that's wrong here, and I know you'd agree with this. When I was starting out in broadcasting, which let's just say it was well over 50 years ago, the big deal was the BBG, which preceded the CRTC, was metamorphosing, if that's even a word, into the CRTC. And the CRTC under Pierre Junot at the time, the Junos are named for him, is a tough cookie. And the biggest deal in his mind, expressed to the Canadian public, was we want to stay away from concentration of ownership. That was what he wanted to do, stay away from concentration of ownership, so Canadians get a full array of news from various competitive news sources. Who the hell owns broadcast media now? Bell Media, Rogers, Chorus, if it manages to stay alive, and CTV. Well, CTV is Bell. So, you know, what are you going to do with that? There's like 3 or 4 of them, and everybody else is gone. There's nothing but concentration of ownership.
And Peter, they rely upon the Prime Minister's office largesse to stay in business.
Yeah.
Bell is losing money hand over fist. It's still, now part of it is mismanagement, but it still is asking for the government for a lot more. And you said about Chorus, you remarked that if it stays alive, it seems that KK Pelado from Quebec is looking to buy it. That'd be one person buying it. So we have a few individuals in charge of the media, which is why Canadians, and I'm right now, I'm in Buckhorn. I'll be in Toronto taping tomorrow, but I'm in Buckhorn. And most people outside of urban centers are just saying, you know, we don't believe, which is why people watch your show, watch my show, and they want to have some good. It's not, you and I don't make the news. We don't create the news.
We don't even do news. We discuss the news and we take editorial opinions.
And we analyze things. And that's what people want. They want some real opinion. And not everybody agrees with you or I, but they know that they're going to have thoughtful, considered opinion that is not being paid by those with the taxpayers' dollars. And that's important.
Stephen LeDrew, always a pleasure. And although you're not Jewish, I think you're an honorary Jew. So I'm going to say Shana Tova Umetuka, which is Happy New Year and a sweet one.
Shana Tova. Someday we'll talk about how I got the first war criminal in Canada.
That will be good. I'll see you next week. Okay.
See you then. Bye-bye, Peter.
You're with the Shurman Report, daily news commentary, live at 5 p.m. Video version live at X, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's Peter Shurman.
What I'm about to do is quite different for me. I don't read tweets, and I don't usually acknowledge the authoring of others. But I read tweets every morning for myself. Seems silly. So many things on there are written by bots, but I follow people whom I know to be real. I read, and it clues me into what they're talking about and what general opinion appears to be here and around the world. The following one is something I saw this morning, and it spoke to me. I won't share the author's name because I haven't asked for permission, but I know of him, and his sentiments as expressed are like nothing I've seen over the past 24 hours. In fact, they're like nothing I've ever seen on Twitter or X. Never before. Listen to this. I really don't think you understand the absolute miracles that we witnessed last night here in Israel. In fact, I am sure you don't. Let's break this down. Israel has 3 air defense systems, each one of them a technological wonder, and that's not me saying it. That's Dr. Gold, who basically invented the Iron Dome, who told me that. The level and sophistication of the Iron Dome is simply unparalleled, but the Iron Dome only knows how to detonate short-range rockets or missiles within a 70-kilometer range, give or take. Then Israel has the David Sling system. That knows how to deal with mid-range missiles up to approximately 300 kilometers. And then we have the Arrow system that literally detonates missiles that can fly outside the Earth's atmosphere. That has a range of about 2,400 kilometers. Last night, as Iran rained down ballistic missiles on Israel, all 3 defense systems were activated and implemented to perfection. The chances of all these incredibly complex systems working in unison as flawlessly as they did last night are basically non-existent. If one thing went wrong, if one of those ballistic missiles hit an apartment building, a shopping center, or an army base, we would now be burying hundreds of Israelis. And all of that is not even the biggest miracle. A few hours ago, I got a WhatsApp message from a good friend who is a senior executive at a very large software company and who wasn't exactly a God-fearing Jew until yesterday. Here's what he wrote. If you're looking for miracles, man, last night I started believing. Missiles hit all around me, but none of them hit my house, or any house for that matter. He elaborated some more and shared info about the missiles that he watched land just meters away from very strategic places in Israel, to say the least. Each one of those defense systems is, in and of itself, pretty miraculous. But what is even more insane is the low casualty numbers from the rockets and missiles that we're not intercepting. Where did those missiles go? I'll tell you where. They landed in sand, they landed in water, and in empty spaces, in quotation marks. Have you been to Israel? It is a microscopic country. What empty spaces? Where are these empty spaces? How have hundreds of Iranian ballistic missiles all either gotten detonated by miraculous systems or totally missed their mark and land in empty spaces, causing 0 casualties and minimal damage? How? Listen, I get it. This thought process begs the question, where was God during the horrible terrorist attack yesterday? Where was he on October 7th? Where was he during the Holocaust? All valid questions that require a very serious, nuanced conversation. But if you know anything about what had to happen last night, and throughout this war in general for such a low number of casualties, you'll know that what we witnessed last night was the equivalent of God splitting the sea right before our eyes. Guess what? When God split the sea, there were those who didn't believe it was a miracle and didn't jump in. And there are also those who feel the need to explain it naturally. Okay, that's fine. You don't want to call yesterday an act of God? That's your choice. But like my friend, if you look at these events objectively, you'd have a really hard time seeing those hundreds of deadly missiles land in empty spaces and not see the hand of God. Last night was an incredible display of the collaboration between 2 of the powers that protect the Jewish people, the Israel Defense Force and God. Last night will go down in history right alongside many of Israel's accomplishments in this war, including the beepers and the unprecedented low ratio between combatant and civilian as a military operation, the likes of which the world has never seen, ever. Last night will be analyzed by military strategists and experts for generations. Last night, we witnessed history. Last night, we witnessed open miracles. Last night, we witnessed God in all his glory, watching over his children. A quick
You're with the Shurman Report, daily news commentary, live at 5 p.m. Video version live at X, YouTube, and Facebook. Here's Peter Shurman.
A quick word before I sign off on a shortened show for today and for this week. This evening, Jewish people begin the high holy days. A new year is at the commencement and begins at sundown. The end comes a week from Friday evening, and that's Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. I have never been particularly religious, but I have been, and I am, a proud Jew. I know my heritage. I know of the suffering that it took along the way for me to even be alive and living here in Canada. So I want to wish you all Shana Tova Umetuka, and that's meant for all viewers and listeners, whether you're Jewish or not. It has a simple yet profound meaning, and if any year that I've seen, that I've ever lived, needed such a message, this is the one. The meaning is, have a good and sweet year. New Year's Jewish style is nothing like January 1st. It has a huge significance religiously. If you encounter Jewish friends, maybe try to remember to say, Shana Tova. Shana Tova. There will be no Shurman Report tomorrow or Friday, so I'll see you on Monday. Good evening, everyone.
The Shurman Report, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video version at YouTube, Facebook, and always at petershurman.com. Thanks for listening to the Shurman Report. If you'd like to connect with Peter directly, just go to petershurman.com.